Good morning, everybody. As you can see in this presentation, though I'm presenting this work because I led the task, a lot of people participated. Some of them are not from the project. I just kind of went head hunting and asked a few people that knew quite a bit about fish welfare or about some of the parameters to help me out. We decided to only work with seabream for two reasons. One, seabream's got a bit higher production than sea bass, and we had to choose between one or the other. And also there's another European project who was trying to work on the welfare of sea bass, so we thought it would be better to just carry on with seabream. The objectives of the presentation is organized like this. I kind of state a bit what the objectives of the task are, the reason why we're doing it, and I put forth some definitions because I think it is important to then carry on understanding what the methodology was, and there are no real results because this is a lead review with a theoretical scheme on how to certify fish for welfare, but I will show you what we've already done on it, and then the conclusions and recommendations. So the main objective of this task was to list operational welfare indicators which we could measure and use to validate fish welfare. Like I said, the focus is on seabream as the farm fish species, and we tried to give a lot more importance to the animal-based indicators. Reason being that even though there are other types of indicators, which are like what we would say environmental-based indicators, like the water quality, they don't necessarily guarantee the welfare of the animals. I might have a superb water quality, but the parameters I'm missing, I am measuring, might not be the ones that are really reflecting the welfare of the fish. They are necessary. I'm not saying that temperature or oxygen are not important, but it is, but maybe I'm missing something. So we try to suggest as many as possible indicators that were more animal-based. So like things like related with the fish behavior, or even if the fish is given options, what will the fish choose? So entering a bit, like I said, on the definitions, it is important to kind of realize that stress is not necessarily a bad thing. Stress can lead to adaptive processes, and when a fish is exposed to the same stressor for the second time, sometimes it responds better. The problem is, like, if the stress is so intense, the fish actually fails to give to be able to respond to it, and that is like called like distress in a way. It's not just a stress event that the fish reacts and somehow can become stronger. It is a maladaptation. If the fish is in distress, this maladaptation can lead the fish to death eventually. So it's not a good thing. Also, we can see another thing I kind of wanted to talk about is like health. A lot of people consider like, oh, if they are healthy, then they're fine. Well, yeah, they're not in a bad welfare situation, probably, but it's not really a measurement of welfare, because I mean they can be healthy but still not be in a very good mental state, even though we don't really know that much about what the mental state is of a fish and about its emotional needs, so to say. It does have a mental state, so that is important to be kept in mind. And also, like I put here, like if an animal is in bad health but is unaware of it, then it really doesn't give him any unhappiness. It's like the animal has a little tumor, which is a sign of bad health, but it doesn't really affect its mental state. He's completely unaware of it. It doesn't hurt, and it lives very happily with his tumor until the tumor actually becomes so big that it starts molesting. And also, like, what is it? Just changing a bit and carrying on with the presentation. What are welfare indicators? Basically, they have tools, in our case, to assess the fish welfare. This work is based on operational welfare indicators, which are the ones we can use in the farm or on site, and they must be of good quality, they must be robust, they must be repeatable, we must be able to compare them, and they must reflect welfare. Also, they must be easy to measure. I can't be too complicated, and I can't go into a farm and spend the whole day to take one measurement. And they are not lab-based, different from the lab-based welfares, which normally are these ones basically, like all the, as you know, lab measurements, like a lot of it, like cortisol and gene expression, etc. Those are what we would call lab measured welfare indicators, which are very good for research or to validate the operational welfare indicators, but not so practical for the purpose of this work. So how did we start developing the work? We committed to do like a review of welfare indicators, but obviously there's loads and loads and loads of welfare indicators. So we decided to kind of frame them to do a full assessment of what would be the welfare. How could we measure the welfare of seabream in a farm? And we kind of identified there's lots of things that's to make the fish, to have the fish in a good state of welfare. The fish has health needs, behavioral needs, environmental needs, and resource needs. When I say resource needs, I'm basically mainly referring to feed. These basically, for the ones that are familiar with animal welfare, are very similar or overlap a bit with the so-called 5 freedoms. There is one fifth freedom, which is the freedom from fear and distress, which is very difficult to measure or to find a criteria to show that the animal is free from fear and distress. So we did not work with that one, but we worked with these 4 types of needs, trying to get to 4 different principles: good feeding, good housing, good health, and appropriate behavior to answer these questions you can see here. Whether they are fed properly, housed properly, healthy, are they well domesticated, do they reflect an optimal emotional state? And to answer this, we needed to get some criteria. So these are definitions in the work we developed. They are not by any means, they are not only, we are not the first author to stipulate this. This is based already in previous work that had been done in land animals with a project called Welfare Quality. So we used more or less their framework. And these criteria, we defined a series of criteria. In this case, they are species specific to see how we would assess that these 4 principles were working well. And to have this criterion working, we chose some welfare measurements for each one of them. How can I measure that the animals are not hungry? Well, like, do they consume, do they grow, etc. Then these are the specific vocabulary when we refer to an animal unit, and the scope for every parameter we developed. We said whether the indicator was good to be used for land-based systems, cage systems, whether they were based on the animal, whether they were based on the management in the environment, and also on the phase of the life cycle. Something might be really good for broodstock and completely useless for larvae. And then this is like the list we all developed. So we came out like, as you say, we put the 4 principles: feeding, housing, health, and behavior. For each one of them, we chose a few criteria. And for each one of them, again, we chose at least 2 parameters to measure them. So and then the scope, like I said, whether they are animal-based, etc. The great majority, as you can see, even though I made all the speech like this is not to be confused with health, still is like a lot of parameters are focused on health. And then throughout the document, what we did was like, let's define each parameter very carefully in details. And this is where we got like a lot of authors like explaining to us how to do it. So this we made a table for each parameter like this, and then gave a score for what will happen for the parameter. But in the end, we needed to give a proper score, like how does this, how do we integrate the whole thing? We decided, because we did not really know exactly which principle is more important right now. We're considering that each principle is worth 25% of 100% of this assessment of welfare in a farm. And then we just kind of gather things. So basically, the score we saw in the previous slides, if we've assessed many culture units, there is a table to define how many culture units we need to assess per farm. Then how does it work? Like how many get a 1, how many get a 2, how many get a 0, and what the parameter would be worse. And then you integrate everything in the criterion, and then again into the principle. At criterion level, we use some filters, because sometimes we've decided that some criteria were more important than the others. So the score system needs still needs a bit of fine tuning, because we don't really know if by using it right now, and if I go to 10 farms, whether I can distinguish a very bad farm from a very good farm in terms of welfare. We've only done it in one system, so we don't really know how good it is to distinguish. But right now there is a theoretical proposal, and we did do a test run. We did this test run in a couple of tanks in IRTA. 3 of us from this document came, we did it, and like you would expect, immediately we had problems. We had proposed a novel object test as it was defined in a paper to evaluate whether the fish presented an exploratory behavior, as that being one indicator of a positive emotional status. That was very good in theory. In practice, it just did not work at all. We don't really know yet what we're going to do about this. We thought about different objects. What are we looking at? How are we going to measure that the animals are interested in it once, like, they got the initial fright that something new came into their system? Will they perceive it? Blah, blah, blah. So we are thinking, because we do need a video camera, a submersible video camera, like an ROV or something, that maybe the camera itself can be used as the novel object. We haven't tried it yet. We are also looking into buying better video camera, because the swimming behavior, we thought it would be very easy to appreciate just by watching. It's not difficult in some cases, in some others it's more difficult. The problem was like we needed clearer criteria to define whether they are swimming normally and calmly or whether they're all agitated. It's very extreme cases, it's very clear. You either have a big mess in the school of fish or whether they're all really nicely swimming around their using well their space. When you have intermediate situations, it depends. Some people think it's more, so this needs to be much more clearly defined and with a lot more detail. We also had prepared everything in Excel sheets to take all the notes, etc. Came to the conclusion that we need something that when you are assessing, you can just tick, 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 and that would be much easier with a tablet than with an Excel sheet that can get wet or etc. So this is like some of the practical difficulties we found. We haven't scored it yet. We haven't done it so long ago, so we don't have the scores. But anyway, it was only 2 units. So, and luckily they were different. So I think if we distinguish that they are different, that'll be a good indication. And then as conclusions and recommendations, like after I explain all this, there's all these problems, it's very clear this is a system that is open to modifications. It is based on the 5 freedoms and on those 4 principles. They are okay. I like them, and I'm sure quite a few of you understand this is a thing that is being used for the last 50 years. So at least it has the benefit of being an experimented system, the 5 freedoms being like something that is kind of robust. And it does, like, because they are the 5 freedoms, they do prevent the animal from experiencing bad situations. But if we move from this paradigm that if they are not feeling bad, then they are feeling good. And if we kind of try to really ensure that they're having positive experiences, or that there's a way of measuring positive welfare and not negative welfare, this doesn't really ensure that, then things need to be moved forward a bit. It's much more difficult to decide, okay, I don't have high cortisol, so this is fantastic, but what should I have high to declare that the animal is actually super happy in its own way. On the other hand, like, this is the first formal procedure to assess seabream welfare. There has not been any scheme yet developed specifically for seabream. There are obviously schemes in the market, like certification schemes that are in the market, that if you read what they state they are ensuring, like sustainability and welfare, health and welfare, that lots of things they are. But if you start reading the small print, you do not find exactly how they are measuring welfare. And I'm only talking about seabream and sea bass. There are good schemes for salmonids in place these days, or at least there are schemes specifically for salmonid welfare, but they do not exist for seabream or other Mediterranean species. So this is important to emphasize. This is the first one. And also, like I said, I mean, we proposed a series of indicators, 21. Having put them in practice just once, I can see that some of them, we still need to do a better definition or a more validated. It's not the definition of the parameter itself, but it's like the methodology needs some fine tuning so that you can later validate it for the purpose you state. And I think this is all. Okay, thank you very much.